Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Rocket Mortgage Data Dive Show. Got a lot to cover for you this evening. We're going to look into some prior leaderboards, figure out what makes Detroit Golf Club function, if you will, what type of players generally play well here. We're going to take a look at the forecast and everything else that you need to finalize your wagers, get a head start on your lineups this week in DFS. I'll also cover the research that I posted earlier today around Detroit Golf Club and the players in the field this week who fit that pattern. So we got a lot to get into. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytics tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where, as I just alluded to, I posted some research around the Detroit Golf Club and the past 5 winners, considering Detroit has only been seen since 2019. So not a whole lot of a pattern to establish, but I did find some for you all. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour this week and every week, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. And then finally for social media, and speaking of Wednesday evenings, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation. And if you are a subscriber to his article, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday night as we continue the DFS talk over there. We talk about game theory, our favorite areas of price board, everything that you need to finalize your lineups after the DFS Tactics show here on Calls. It's always a great discussion every week. So if you're not subscribed and following him over on social media, you're really missing out. So make sure you're doing that. Lastly, we are live. Chat's open. I want to hear from you all. If you made any wagers, I certainly fired off a few players that I liked at the numbers that they came out this morning. What type of players do you think play best here? Who's your early, lean in terms of who you're focused on playing this week? Any players you're not particularly interested in playing? All that good stuff. Would love to hear from you all in the community. So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2024 Rocket Mortgage. And we start, as we always do, on a Monday evening over at the extended Windfinder forecast. We are in Detroit for the Rocket Mortgage. Let me get everything out of the way here. Looks like there's quite a bit of wind tomorrow. Not that it factors into the tournament, but we could get a little bit of rain tomorrow. But come Thursday and Friday, looks fantastic. Highs in the low to mid 70s. This looks extremely pleasant, at least in terms of an extended forecast. Maybe the wind picks up a little bit on Friday afternoon, but again, without the super forecast, without kind of an hour by hour look, hard to really designate anything in terms of a wave advantage. However, Saturday that changes. Saturday looks like we could be getting quite a bit of a system in, a little bit of rain, or at least the potential for rain all day. High amount of winds, especially gusty winds, up into the low 30s potentially. And then that wind, it looks like it stays on Sunday. It looks like it's a cool front, a cold front, if you will, considering the high on Sunday is supposed to only be in the mid 60s. So a little bit of wind Saturday and Sunday potentially, at least in the forecast early on this week. No rain really, except for maybe tomorrow. But without the super forecast, we're not going to be taking a look at anything in terms of a wave advantage just yet. But there looks like there could be some wind, especially over the weekend. And we did see the wind pick up in 2021. I just realized my camera's not centered. We did see the wind pick up when Cam Davis won a couple of years ago, technically 3 years ago, which kept the scoring, down compared to the other years. So I'm not ready to say that this won't be easy. Detroit is notoriously one of the easiest courses on tour, but there's a look at the extended forecast for Detroit Golf Club as of right now. We move to Fantasy National, and I am going to check the moderate and windy conditions. More than likely it would just be moderate, but just in case the winds really do pick up, I'm going to go to the last 2 years, last 36 rounds, and uncheck this 2024 filter in moderate and windy conditions. In the past 2 years, our top performers have been Ricky, Harry Hall, Patrick Rogers, Carson Young, Chris Kirk, Andrew Novak, Adam Schenk, Brendan Todd, Eric Cole, and Mark Hubbard. There's your top 10 in terms of performance or total performance in moderate and windy conditions. If anything, this seems like, based on the forecast that we just saw, would come into play more so over the weekend as opposed to Thursday and Friday. But just in case the forecast changes throughout the week, or if that system that's supposed to be coming in on Saturday gets moved up to Friday, whatnot, there's a look at your top wind performers. But two things that we absolutely know for certain about Detroit. This is a Don Ross design. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at Don Ross performance over the past 2 years. Our top performers on Don Ross designs: Stefan Jaeger, Cam Davis, of course, winning here a few years ago, Tom Kim, Nikolai Højgaard, Taylor Moore, Taylor Pendrith, Cam Young, Troy Merritt, Michael Kim, and Alex Noren. But the overarching, or the filter that is going to dominate this week, particularly tonight and moving forward to the mixed condition model come Wednesday, Detroit's just easy. It is just easy. That is not what I wanted. Let me get the historic conditions for you all. We looked at this last night, but just as a reminder, we've had 20 rounds. We've had 5 years of data here at Detroit. There have been 2 rounds, that have not been easy. And they've played to average when the wind really picked up. Again, round 2 in 2021, and then in round 2 in 2022, they played to average when we had some moderate wind there as well. But every single other round has been easy. This is one of the easiest courses on the PGA Tour. So when rounds have been easy relative to par the last 2 years, our top performers have been Taylor Pendrith, Alex Noren, Bo Hostler, Doug Kim, Chan Kim, Luke List, Ryo Hitsatsune, Ben Coles, Akshay Bhatia, and Michael Kim. So definitely give these players added consideration in your lineups, or if you're on the fence about a number in terms of outrights, perhaps this gives you the boost or confidence you need to fire off that on that number, considering these players traditionally play easy rounds or an easy course as well, and they are in the field this week. Detroit is one of the easiest out there. Okay, with that, I think we're just going to go ahead and jump into the prior leaderboards, as there are several things that I want to check, especially in the strokes gained. I don't think it's any surprise that the 2 main shot types here are approach and putting, just like you would expect on any regular PGA Tour course. But I'm really interested in studying this off the tee number, as for the top 10s, the top 5s, we looked at this last night. The off the tee was kind of suppressed. And then for the winners, it really, really, really jumped. So is it off the tee per se, or is it something else, say driving distance or accuracy? So I'm quite interested in that and looking into that. So last year with Ricky's win, we'll take a look at the top 16 here. Few players negative in off the tee, but the thing that jumps out to me the most is, really, Colin is the highest number here at 3.4 of the players in the top 16. There wasn't a whole lot to be gained here in off the tee. Now, if we sort on off the tee, you've got not a whole lot of correlation here. A lot of middling finishes. You see, Obear did not hit his irons very well, didn't putt well. Callum Tarrant didn't seem like he made a putt all week. Top 30'd, was good ball striking that week. But you have a couple of, just two missed cuts, pretty high in terms of off the tee. Not a whole lot to be gained here. I mean, there's Colin at 3.4, but that's really not a whole lot. As opposed to when you look at approach, Ches Reavie, 8.5. Our winner, 7.5. Second in terms of total approach. A lot more correlation. Hopefully that's fairly obvious as you see here. Alex Smalley, a pretty middling to clunker of a made cut depending on your definition, but win, a top 10, a top 5, top 10, runner-up, top 15. So approach, big deal here at Detroit. If we look at putting, I mean, except for the fact that the winner's not in our top 5 or 6, I mean, he's probably, 10th, in between 10th and 12th maybe. A lot of putting here as well. Top 5, runner-up, top 10, top 5, top 15. So, of course, the two shot types. But as I was looking today, I was not impressed by this off-the-tee correlation as much as I might have insinuated last night. I'm a little bit shocked by that. We look at the around the green. Again, not a whole lot to be gained here. We have some cut making. You have some good performances. I mean, elite one from Adam Hadwin, top 10 from Malnati, but more good. You know, a top 25, top 20. Down here a little bit, but you have some missed cuts. I just don't see too much in terms of around the green, except for on the par 5s, and I think I would just rather focus on the par 5 performance with that. If we look at 2022 and Tony Finau's win, and look at the strokes gained, again, the top 16 just due to ties. Only one player negative. Off the tee a little bit more here. Our winner probably led with a 5.8. Nope, second, behind Goddard. But first, second, eighth. This was much more correlating in 2022. Much more correlating. Looking in the approach. Again, with the exception of Matt Kuchar, who, again, was very bad on the greens. Look at this correlation here with the approach. Top 10, top 25, top 10, runner-up, winner, top 10. Approach is a big deal here. It's an easy course. Players are going to be firing at flags. The greens are generally soft, generally receptive. So yeah, see green firmness, soft, medium. Did get firm in 2022, but generally pretty darn receptive. So players are just going to be firing at flags, especially if that system that was projected or forecast to be Tuesday, if that gets moved back or if they get more rain. I can see this playing extremely easy again. The putting, not necessarily as much as it was last year. So it looks like off the tee took a little bit more precedence in 2022 than the putting in 2022. A little bit of a reverse from last year. And then finally, let's take a quick look at Cam Davis's. I don't usually like taking a look at 3 years, but maybe we can try to break this tie, if you will. Yeah, so more negative off the tee. Not a whole lot to be gained in 2021 with off the tee. So perhaps 2022 was a bit of an outlier in that regard. I mean, you see your winner, Cam Davis, gained less than 1 off the tee in his win. I meant to go to 2023. Tony Finau gained close to 6. Ricky only gained slightly over 1. It doesn't appear to be necessarily that big of a factor off the tee in general, which means I think we're going to be looking at something specific on the fairways and greens page view. So with only 2 metrics to look at on this page view here, we're going to bring this into the last 24 rounds. We're going to take a look at the last 3 months, just get a really narrow focused view on who's been hitting their irons well. So in the last 24 rounds, our top approach players in the field this week: Joel Damon, Kevin Yu, Keith Mitchell, Aaron Rye, Lonto Griffin, Lee Hodges, Kelly Craft, Adam Svensson, Chandler Phillips, and Matt Wallace. Interesting names there. And then we did this last week. We did this last night. We'll do it again tonight. This can turn into a putting contest, considering how easy it is here at Detroit Golf Club. So, I did not mean to narrow that to the last 2 years just yet. So, courses. We're going to look at Detroit. Obviously, where we are this week is Bent and Poa annua. The next being Oakdale, host of the Canadian Open last year, RBC Canadian Open. Silverado, host of the Fortinet in the fall. And then finally, where we were last week, TPC River Highlands. These are the courses that are consistent and or recent in terms of hosting PGA Tour events with Bent and Poa annua greens. So on Bent and Poa annua, our top putters have been Taylor Montgomery. Again, it's only one tournament. Do take that into consideration. It is a very small sample size. Justin Lauer, Roger Sloan, Ricky Fowler, Sam Ryder, Chesson Hadley, Alex Noren, Taylor Moore, Harry Hall, and Minwoo Lee. Before I forget, there has been one field change that I've seen. I've not had the opportunity to check since, I'd say, early afternoon, so there may be others. But the only field change that I have seen so far is Philip Knowles. Philip Knowles has withdrawn. He is not playing this week, and that's why he has a star, just for your information. Okay, so at least for now, we're going to be focused entirely on approach and putting on this page view. We'll move to fairways and greens. Take a look at last year's leaderboard. Surprisingly, for me, the distance wasn't that big of a deal. Now, Ricky was positive. Taylor Moore, Peter Quest was very high in terms of driving distance, but you got a lot of players that were negative in terms of driving distance last year. Instead, it was the greens, which makes a little bit of sense considering this is a Don Ross design. He has the typical perched greens and sloped back to front. They can be difficult to hit. Typical Don Ross designs can be difficult to hit. But I'm a little suspect of this because look how easy the greens generally are to hit here at Detroit. 72.5% versus 65% at the average PGA Tour event. So I'm a little bit skeptical of wanting to take a look essentially into greens. I would have really thought it would have been distance, especially considering our winners in the past. Ricky Fowler can move it. Tony Finau moves it. Cam Davis long off the tee. Bryson, no explanation. Really, the only winner here that doesn't move it off the tee is Nate Lashley. So, all right. If we sort, got quite a few missed cuts from up here pretty high last year in terms of driving distance. We did have Peter Quest who finished top 5, a couple of top 25s, but not correlating at all in terms of distance, which again is shocking to me. Greens, you would expect if players are hitting greens, they're generally playing pretty well. 2022 and fairways and greens, much more what I would have thought in terms of distance. Only 3 players negative in terms of distance. We know how much Tony Finau moves it off the tee, and he was much closer to field average than what you might suspect. Wyndham Clark, very high with the distance. Wallace was high. Henley, Cam Davis down here at the bottom of the top 15. Distance was much more a thing in 2022. So I'm thinking 2023, last year's, was a bit of an outlier. Then again, it's important to remember 2022, the off the tee seemed like it might be an outlier. So again, 2021, and this is some of the problem that I mentioned last night. This course, for whatever reason, has been fairly volatile in terms of year-over-year predictability. Of course, Nate Lashley wins. It had never been seen before. But then you had Bryson, who didn't play in the inaugural, then wins. Cam Davis missed the cut in 2019, 2020, and then wins in 2021. So he had no course history. Finau had never played, or if he did play, it was a very middling finish. It's hard to say. It's hard to say if prior course history is really a big deal here. Again, just looking at 2021, we've got, at least at the very extreme top, distances something, and then it kind of falls off. So I don't know. It's definitely not fairways. These fairways are very easy to hit. That I don't think is something that we want to really focus on. You got some cut making up here, to be fair, but don't think that is what we want to look at. We got some miscuts fairly high in terms of good drives gained, surrounded with some. This looks like all or nothing, really. I would have thought driving distance, but last year's Rocket Mortgage is really kind of throwing me off, considering it didn't seem to be that big of a deal. This is 2022, of course. Only one miscut in the fairways. I mean, your winner led in good drives, led in green, so you definitely can't ignore that. Yeah, I'm just having some trouble here. So I'll be quite interested to see what Microsoft Excel says when we get into the real deep weeds of the data. Like, Ricky was negative in fairways. He was good in good drives just because he hit a lot of greens. So, I don't know. Be interested to hear from you all in chat. Put it in the comments if you're not able to catch the show live. What do you think plays well here at the Rocket Mortgage in regards to distance, fairways, good drives, greens, etc.? I'm going to stick to my assumption here. We're going to go look at driving distance. We'll take a look at this in maybe a couple different ways. Well, maybe one way. I'm still leaning towards driving distance. We'll take a look at it when it's easy relative to par. That's one thing we absolutely know for a fact about Detroit. So your top driving distance players when rounds are easy relative to par: Cam Champ, Chris Goddard, Minwoo Lee, Paul Barjon, Callum Tarrant, Vincent Norman, Johnny Vegas, Taylor Pendrith, Nikolai Højgaard, and Ryan Brim. Just out of curiosity, let's see how much this changes in terms of driving distance in general. Say like the last 24 rounds with no filter, just kind of looking in the general sense of driving distance. Minwoo Lee, Keith Mitchell, Cam Champ, Kevin Yu. I don't think he was up there when rounds were easy. Kevin Yu, Chris Goddard, Cam Young, Kevin Doherty. I know he was not up there when rounds were easy. Toasty the same, Woodland, and Norman. So, okay. But it is hard to ignore how much the greens, particularly last year, mattered. So we'll take a quick look at that. Again, I'm not terribly confident in this, but your top greens gained players when rounds are easy: Noren, Garnett, Tyler Duncan, Aaron Rai, Taylor Pendrith, Bo Hostler, Joel Damon, Ryo Hitsatsune, Rico Hoey, and Doug Gim. We'll get this set for scoring, but this is going to be really easy in terms of scoring. It's all about how low you can go, with winning scores generally reaching the mid-20s. There are birdies aplenty out there, and even a few eagles. You see Ricky, 10 versus a 3.5. Adam Hadwin, 8 versus a 5.5. Now, Morikawa's a little bit more in the bogeys, but almost every other player in the top 10, I mean, there are a couple of exceptions. Almost every single player here was much higher in the birdies gained than the bogey avoidance. you gotta go low here. 40th from Kadaira, but pretty solid otherwise. Whereas the bogey avoidance, fairly solid as well. 33rd. Where was Ricky? Okay, so Ricky led in birdies gained. That's kind of a tiebreaker because it looks like the bogey avoidance might be a little bit more consistent just by an eyeball test, but he was a little bit further down in terms of the bogey avoidance, whereas he led in the birdies gained. 2022, and Tony, Pendrith, Yeager, all these guys in the double digits. I mean, look at this. Second, first, fifth, second, eighth, second, sixth, seventh, eighth. Just solid. Just extremely solid. Whereas the bogey avoidance, Finau led in it, many, many more good finishes, not elite finishes. So I'm pretty darn confident we're just going to be looking at birdies are better. Of course, we're going to be using the easy relative to par filter. So, your top birdies or better gained players when rounds have been easy relative to par. Eric Cole, S.H. Kim, Chan Kim, Taylor Pendrith, Akshay Bhatia, Eric Van Rooyen, Ryo Hitsatsune, Taylor Montgomery, Luke List, and Scott Piercy. Particularly Eric Van Rooyen because he's got a few of these eagles as well. So most of these players, when you look at birdies or better gained, it's all in the birdies. But Eric Van Rooyen, pretty darn solid, or I would say great to maybe even elite in this field in terms of eagles. Luke List, absolutely. Honorable mention to Taylor Montgomery and Scott Piercy. They get some eagles at a decent rate when it's easy to combine with their good birdie rates as well. Okay. Had an interesting discussion with Gabe a little bit today regarding proximity. Interested to see what you all might think with this. We certainly came to the same conclusion, I think, regarding proximity. Now, if you recall from last night, the majority of approach shots actually come from 200 plus, but this seems a little bit misleading to me considering that three of the four par fives are attackable in two, and the longer hitters can get home in two on this one as well. And there's not a whole lot of long par fours here, so I think this is a little bit misleading. Otherwise, there's really not a range other than maybe 75 to 100 that is, grossly out of line with tour averages. There's just generally a lot of wedges here, just due to the fact that there's several short par fours. If we look, Total Procs played something last year. Only a couple of players, really only one player negative. Taylor Moore was minus 10.5 over 4 rounds. That's pretty darn close to field average. I have a feeling that if we looked at the par 5 performance, majority of these guys played them well. In fact, let's compare that. Let's compare my hypothesis here with this 200 plus performance. It was only Noren and Malnati versus the par 5 performance. Noren, Malnati was okay. It was Pendrith that was, but generally speaking, yeah. It's like Noren didn't play the par 5s well. We saw his 200 plus proximity wasn't very good. Now Malnati's was really poor, but he played the par 5s well. So my guess, knowing that he's not long off the tee, my guess is he was okay from this. Like he would just made him 3-shot holes, would be my guess. But it looks like Total Procs would be something. I'm a little bit concerned about putting a lot of emphasis into that because these greens are small. So if the players are hitting greens in regulation, if they're, you have good proximity totals, I would think we might want to look at opportunities. In fact, I know we just came off of this page view. We looked at birdies are better. It actually might be worthwhile to look at opportunities as well. So your top opportunities gained players when rounds are easy relative to par: Alex Smalley, Chris Kirk, Joel Damon, Carson Young, Charlie Hoffman, Adam Schenk, Kevin Yu, Doug Gim, Daniel Berger, and Adam Svensson. Much more so, much more confident in the birdies are better gained. Opportunities gained might be something as well, though. I do want to mention that for sure. But really, like, not. It looks like all of these ranges are pretty good in terms of performance, which it explains why the total procs is so good. If we look at 2022 and total procs, again, very, very solid. And most of these ranges are pretty darn solid. I just have the sneaking suspicion that it's opportunities instead of total procs. Because the 200 plus was a little bit less 2 years ago than it was last year. Taylor Pendrith was field average essentially. Jaeger was pretty darn close to field average. Siwoo was pretty close to field average. So really only got 2 players negative in 200 plus. Only 1 player negative in 150 to 175. Interesting. We'll take a look at a couple of them, a couple of different proximities. Actually, before we do that, what was the 150 to 175 last year? They're fairly solid. Maybe the 150 to 175, but it's less than the tour average. The reason I say that is 2022 was pretty solid and only 2 players negative. Let's sort on them. Decent here with total 200 plus, pretty darn solid. 2022 and proximity, maybe a little bit less than last year's with this miscut, 49th, 200, cut making, but nothing great. Yeah, I don't know. Again, put it in chat, put it in the comments how you feel about proximity this week. We'll take a quick look here. Narrow this into the last 24, 3 months, so long as it's been in 2024. Your top total procs players in the past 24 rounds: Ryan Moore, Tom Kim, Joel Damon, Chandler Phillips, Sammy Valimaki, Aaron Rai, Carson Young, Pat Gazire, Troy Merritt, Grayson Sigg. Again, I'm just hesitant to look at any particular range because I think the 200 plus would signify the par fives, and it kind of backed it up in a quick eyeball test. So we'll move to par threes, fours, and fives. We saw last night that the par threes didn't really factor too much. Now, Peter Quest played them well, Noren played them well, but there wasn't a whole lot here. Top 5, top 10, it falls off a little bit. Ricky played them okay, but he played the short par threes well, not necessarily the other ones. And you see, we have measurements in all 5 range buckets. On the scorecard, there's 2 to this range, 1 here and 1 here. So every single range gets a look, if you will. 2022 par threes. Yeah, Finau didn't play them well. Cantley, doesn't seem to be a whole lot here. I wouldn't do any range as of right now. So if we look at par threes, it's really kind of 5%. Top par 3 performers: Batia, Pearson Coody, Lee Hodges, Sam Stevens, Chandler Phillips, Parker Coody, Kelly Craft, EVR, David Skins and Ben Griffin. Looking at par 4s. As a reminder, this says this says everything. We don't have any drivable or short, or very short, I should say. We don't have any extremely long. All 10 par 4s fall into these ranges: 4, 2, and 4. Okay, I mean, kind of what you expect there. The majority of holes are par 4s. If there's a range, maybe the 450 to 500, maybe. Yeah, because you have a miscut and a 64th here. Ooh, look at that correlation. Okay, so maybe the 350 to 4, at least from last year, was the most solid. If we look at 2022, kind of lost that there. Well, yeah, 44th, but other than that, that's pretty solid. Maybe the 350 to 4s might be something. Maybe. Be interested to see in Microsoft Excel when we go there. But for now, we'll take a look at. Let's just take a look at the 350 to 4s, actually. I'm interested with that. So, your top performers on par 4s, 350 to 400 in the last 24 rounds: Zach Blair, Stuart Sink, Snedeker, Davis Thompson, Chan Kim, Nate Lashley, Robbie Shelton, Bill Hawes, Josh Teeter, and Taylor Pendrith. So Pendrith popped several times now throughout this evening. Interesting. All right. And then we'll take a look at par 5s. 3 of our par 5s fall to this range on the scorecard. 1 here. So naturally you would think it'd be the 550 to 600. But if you look, like Matty Schmid missed the cut, so it's a 14 miscut. Second, first, second. That's solid, but some miscuts here. Whereas generally just par 5s were solid for our top 10. Looking at 2022 par 5s. Fairly solid in that specific range. If we sort, I mean, Hagee and Chappell missed the cut, but heavy correlation beyond that. I mean, our winner led in the par 5s of that category, or in that range. First, 6th, 30th. Second, 5th, 8th. Several top 10s, couple top 20s. That's pretty solid there, beyond the 2 missed cuts. Pretty solid. So let's, if we need to adjust and come back to them, we will. But our top par 5 performers from 550 to 600 yards in the past 24 rounds: Jacob Bridgman, J.J. Spawn, Akshay Bhatia, Keith Mitchell, Davis Riley, Tom Kim, Chesson Hadley, Aaron Wright, Nate Lashley, and Martin Traynor. Okay. All right, with that, I'll bring us back to the strokes gained, but we can adjust if needed. Let's take a look, deep dive into the data around the Rocket Mortgage, see what the top players year over year have been doing well. We look at strokes gained. Just as I mentioned, it looked like 2022 was a slight outlier, considering how much off the tee mattered. Because generally it hasn't. It's been fairly inconsistent and not too high. The approach has gained. It bottomed out in 2020, rose a little bit, but it's risen steadily each year. So I kind of like seeing that, even though the consistency isn't great. It is rising. It is following a pattern. Around the green, last 3 years have been somewhat solid, but the first 2 were not. Putting not as consistent as I would have thought. Like if we compare this against the average full field course, it's the approach and putting, which is where we're at. So that I like seeing that. I'm mostly interested in this approach because it is gaining year over year in terms of importance. We move to fairways and greens, and this is why I thought it was distance. Having said that, it's doing the opposite of the approach, as the approach has been gaining steadily year over year. Looks like the It looks like the distance is declining year over year, but these are still some pretty big numbers. You see the distance, 61% more important than the average full field course. Yeah, I mean that's pretty darn solid. We do have an extremely high outlier here. If we remove that, it drops to 33%. Okay, maybe not as much of a factor as I wanted to believe, but I still think distance is going to be something. Fairways not. I mean, it was negative when Cam Davis won. It really jumped for Tony Finau, but it's been pretty suspect. The greens were extremely important last year, but pretty darn, if we take that out, the greens, yeah, they become negative 1.5 here. Don't see it in the greens. Good drives. This is a fairly low outlier, so maybe good drives. I mean, it's 1% higher, so I don't see much in this page view except for maybe driving distance. But even after looking at the data, seeing this extremely high outlier, I think it's a little bit less than what I was even thinking. Might not be much to look at in this page view, just being honest. Last week with the Travelers, I had a gut feeling on good drives gained. I just don't have a gut feeling on really anything in here except for maybe driving distance, but I'm not necessarily as confident in that as I was with the good drives gained last week. So, yeah, I'm not sure where I'm going in here. Probably 5% driving distance, but not too much else, really. Not too much else. Not until we get a second year where greens really matter like they did last year. Now, if the greens really matter this year, then we'll take note of that. But I just don't see it. I think this was an outlier year. What's not an outlier is how much the birdies matter here. Maybe not necessarily eagles, although there were several eagles last year. Just, I mean, look at all of these, this huge number in birdies. 3.85, one of the highest that I can recall. I know there's some others, like the Byron Nelson, TBC Craig Ranch. We always talk about how easy it is. It's a 3.83, so the Rocket Mortgage is even higher in terms of birdies gained. I felt like there was another one that was really high, but might not be. This might actually be the the highest number. There's a 3.85. If I go to the summary here, birdies gained 3.57. Yeah, 3.85 is the highest. So there's the Byron Nelson. There's the Byron Nelson at 3.83. 3.85. It's the highest number in birdies gained. Rocket Mortgage. So that tells you where all of our eggs are going in this basket. We're looking at birdies are better gained when rounds are easy. We'll probably look at opportunities gained when rounds are easy. It just makes too much sense to look at those two things. Move to par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Look, pretty even distribution of the strokes gained among the par 3s. It does suggest that the 200 to 225 would be the most important, just based on the highest strokes gained total number. But this is, like 35 to 38% of the strokes gained total of the par 3s. I just don't see it. Anything we do with par 3s is going to be total, and it's going to be very little, 5% maybe at most, because this is actually a pretty high outlier even. If we remove that, it only becomes, par 3s, 1% more important. Removing the high outlier, I don't see much here. 5% at most if I do anything with it at all. We look at the par 4s. Now, despite the correlation that they had, they are gaining year over year. So just like the approach, they are gaining. That is something to take note of. But the par 4s, compared to other PGA Tour events is negative, negative 13%. Where it does matter, like we kind of saw, is in the 350 to 4. This is pretty darn consistent. I take that back. You got a fairly high outlier here. 450 to 500 is gaining year over year. Might not do much with the par 4s either. I might not. Maybe the 350 to 4, but that's a pretty high outlier there. You take that out, and it probably falls a decent bit. And we're still 56.5%. That's pretty high. What's this 450 to 5 number? 8% more important? I don't know. I don't know if any of these are strong enough to look by themselves, because I don't think it's correct to look at all three of these by themselves. I don't think that's the case. But if that's the case, we're going to be looking at like maybe 5% par 4s. Just don't see much there. Because 1.5 out of 3 and 3.75 is roughly 40%. That doesn't constitute looking at this range by itself, and this one's a little bit less. So I don't see it. I don't see it. Conversely, par 5s, very important. There's really only 1 year it wasn't. You remove that, that's a pretty high number. Par 5s, 25% more important if you remove the low outlier. Most of them in here, and that's when this was at its lowest as well. So I'm thinking we were correct in looking in the 550 to 600 par 5s. That's probably where we're going to put all of our focus this week. With par 5s is in these, because there's 3 to here, 1 to here. They do shorten 1 or 2 of the par 5s to play under 550, but you see it doesn't generally equate to much in terms of strokes gained. It's generally in here. So about 65% of your strokes gained total par 5s are in this range alone. So I would probably be looking at this one by itself. And then if we see anything with proximity, I know the raw numbers aren't much. This total prox number actually isn't too high. This is an extremely low outlier. That's an extremely high outlier. So if you remove those, yeah, I mean, you're a little bit under in terms of total prox. Like, look at the wedge distances. 174%, 70%. That's why I don't like proximity, because you can get some really, really odd numbers in there. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see much with proximity. But there's a look at some really, really detailed data around Detroit Golf Club and the Rocket Mortgage. We'll now go to my mixed condition model last year, see what I looked at, see how good it was, how predictable, or how good it was predicting the outcome, results, and all that. So I had the winner third. Granted, Ricky was on an absolute heater, so I can't take too much credit considering he was the most projected on player in the field. But I had several miscuts. Tony Finau, Decky Hubbard. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 missed cuts in my top 20. Not acceptable. I'm looking for 4 to 5, and I doubled that. Not acceptable by any means. Colin Morikawa, Ricky, they had solid performances, sure. Taylor Moore, a sub 10% Taylor Moore who top 5. Fine. I mean, that's, I accept that. That's really good. Chris Kirk, sub 10%. Top 15 is good. So I had some good aspects here, but definitely a lot to improve on. So what did I look at? 25% in birdies or better gain when it's easy. I understand the reasoning. I mean, this course is one of the easiest on the PGA Tour. You got to go low. 25% might be a touch heavy, but I'm going to have a lot of weight in birdies or better gained. At 20% in bent and POA and a putting. That's just too much. We're going to be looking at bent and POA and a putting, absolutely. 20% is a little bit too much because putting is so volatile. So while I am in agreement with using this same metric and filter combination, we're going to back that percentage off a little bit at 15% in this specific length of par 5s. So far, other than having a little bit too much percentage in here, we're looking at roughly the same type of mixed condition model. 10% approach, that's way too light. Way too light. I don't know what that is. So 10% approach, that needs to rise. That's just too low. Par 4s, 10%, okay. Yeah, I just don't know what I'm doing with par 4s just yet. 5% driving distance when it's easy. I like that. That's what kind of where I'm leaning at right now. I had 5% par 3s. I like that. That seems reasonable. And I separated out the 350 to 4 and the 450 to 5 with 5%. This is too much par 4s. This is too much par 4s here. I know the other one is off the end of your screen, but that's just too much par 4s. So I need to lower those percentages. Let's see. What other things could I look at? Maybe proximity? Opportunities gained I didn't have in here. So that is something that probably needs to be looked at. But for the most part, I kind of like where I was at in this these three here, except for lowering this percentage. Really, I kind of think I just need to swap the percentages of the putting and the approach. Make the approach 20, putting 10. But that makes a lot of sense. A little bit too much par 4s, but I like the distance. If I do par 3s, it'll be par 5, be 5%. So how predictive were these? We had a field of 152. So I'm looking at, low to mid 50s, ideally, in terms of predictability. Birdies are better gained. Okay, 55. Not great, but the best one, which probably led to, again, why I was so poor in terms of results. If 55 is my best performing predictive metric, not going to be good. But birdies are better was the most predictive. Putting, very volatile statistic, but 64. What's surprising is the irons weren't predictable, and they usually are. So, for example, let's see. Ricky was the number one iron player coming in. Morikawa, of course. Taylor Moore was fairly middling with his irons. Must have had a good week or something, but he was always good with birdies or better. Let's try to look at some others here. Chris Kirk was middling with his irons coming in. Harmon, fairly middling. Jaeger was 81st. So you can see why that approach number rose as much as it did with all those, 80ths and 70ths that creeped their way into the top 10. Par 4s were okay, I suppose. Distance a little underwhelming. So nothing, other than birdies are better, nothing was really terribly predictable, which is, again, probably why this was a poor results-based mixed condition model. So we have a lot of room for improvement. But I'm going to be honest, I kind of like a lot of the things that I was looking at here. So I'm hoping last year was just kind of a fluky year. We'll see. But with that, we're going to end the show off, as we always do, going to the early look file. I'll show you the metrics and stats from Detroit Golf Club specifically in these past 5 years. And then I'll end off with the research that led to me posting what I did on social media. So first thing, let's take a look at approach. Your top approach players, specifically at Detroit Golf Club. in these 5 years. Aaron Wright's only one time. Pendrith has been very good with his irons here. Callum Tarrant just hadn't putt worth a lick. Henrik Norlander, Smalley. There's Vincent. Taylor Moore has averaged a top 5 finish. He's just put the daylights out. You don't expect that to continue, but maybe these are just greens that he likes. Jaeger's been good. Hoffman a little bit less. JJ Spawn 5 for 5, putting well and hitting his irons well. That's a very good combination. Chris Kurt doing everything pretty darn well. 4 for 4, average finish of 16th. Kisner's been fairly good here. So here's a look at your top iron players. Your top putters on these greens at Detroit Golf Club. Taylor Moore's probably leading. No, it's Justin Lauer at 6.3. Then Taylor Moore. Roger Sloan, 3 for 4, putting well. Interesting. Mav McNeely putting extremely well here as well. 2 for 3. Alex Noren. There's Matt Wallace. JJ Spawn again. Snedeker a little bit less in terms of success, but he's putt well here. Chris Kurt. Lashley, your inaugural winner, 3 for 5. Vincent Whaley, 3 for 4. Okay. Shank, 4 for 5. So there's a look at your top putters. We're going to go to birdies gained, I suppose. Yep. Birdies gained. Pendrith, Taylor Moore. There's Jaeger. Cam Davis, who won 3 years ago. Lauer, Spawn, Wallace. Merritt. Gary Woodland's 0 for 3. Just hadn't avoided bogeys. Champs 3 for 5. Kind of interesting, I guess. McNeely. Kisner. Let's take a look at the par 5s, 550 to 600. Then we'll go into the research. So your top par 5 performers from 550 to 600. Yuan, Schmid, Cam Young, Johnny Vegas, Wesley Bryan 2 for 2. There's Spawn again. There's Taylor Moore again. KH Lee's only 1 for 3. Been playing the par 5s well. Cam Davis again. Matt Wallace. Vincent Whaley. Jaeger. Lonto Griffin. Okay. All right. Let me sort this back on best average finish. Then we'll go into the research. So, first thing I want to show you all. Let's take a look at the winner matrix as soon as I adjust these columns. Like I was saying earlier in the show, there's not a whole lot of correlation here with prior performance indicative of future success. Of course, Nate Lashley, your inaugural winner, so no course history for anybody. Bryson didn't play it in 2019, then wins. Mentioned Cam Davis, like 2 missed cuts and then wins. Finau had a 53rd and then wins. Now, Ricky's been fairly solid most of the time. He did miss the cut the year prior, so not a whole lot here in terms of prior performance. But what I want you to note is these champions' form leading into their win. We talked about Ricky and the heater that he was on since the Masters. I mean, only one finish outside the top 15. It was a major, so you can forgive that. A top 5, a couple other top 10s, so he was in immaculate form. Tony Finau was in immaculate form, coming in off a win at the 3M, so he was a back-to-back winner on the PGA Tour. But he also had a runner-up at Vedanta. Runner-up at the RBC Canadian. Another top 5. He was in fantastic form. Cam Davis was a little bit, clearly not in the same form as them, but he also had a couple of top 30s. Top 25 of the RBC Heritage. Top 30 of the Wells Fargo. Bryson was in great form coming off the 2020 break. Nate Lashley a little bit less so, but he even top 30 the U.S. Open and top 30 the Byron Nelson. So I believe I posted that every single player or every single champion had at least 2 top 30s. If you remove Nate Lashley, then every single player had at least 1 top 25, or every single champion had at least 1 top 25 before winning the Rocket Mortgage. Also, take a look at their iron form coming into the Rocket Mortgage. Like, Ricky was in stellar iron form. Tony Finau was in stellar iron form. Even Cam Davis, yes, he lost 4.5 strokes at the Memorial. It was a very bad week. But he had gained 3 straight tournaments before the Memorial. Then lost, all of his approach at the Memorial. Then comes back and wins the Rocket Mortgage. So he was in good iron form coming into it, despite his previous event. Bryson, great iron form. Nate Lashley was in fantastic iron form. He was not putting well. That's what was not giving him top end results. But he was in fantastic iron form. And look at these numbers, 2.6, 2.1. Look at Tony Finau. He gained 8, gained 5, gained 5.5. These guys weren't just scraping by, like barely gaining strokes against the field. They were in fantastic iron form leading into their win at the Rocket Mortgage. The only other thing I think I could probably show you is when the one thing we know about the Rocket Mortgage is that it's easy. So let's take a look at performance when tournaments were easy. Just for clarification, I deem a tournament easy if it has at least half of the rounds are easy and it has no rounds that are difficult. So the bare minimum qualification is 2 rounds of easy, 2 rounds of average. You can have 3 rounds of easy and 1 round of average, or 4 rounds of easy. As long as it doesn't have a difficult round and half the rounds were easy. I'm just giving, you all may disagree with that classification, but that's what I deem an easy tournament. That's what these performances are. Ricky Fowler, top 15 in an easy tournament. The Amex that year was easy. Top 20 from Tony Finau. Top 30 from Cam Davis. Bryson played easy tournaments well. Nate Lashley missed the cut, but he also had a top 15 at an easy tournament early in the year. He might not have had the best form leading in, but he had also had 2 top 15s early in the season before the Masters. So he had at least played well. So that's what I have for you all in terms of a Data Dive show and what led to what I posted on social media in terms of research. If you're interested in that and the 20 players, there were 20 in the field this week that followed the criteria that I put forward. Make sure you go check that out over on social media. My handle is in the description as well. I want to thank you all for tuning in, watching, listening, and supporting the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do. Taking an in-depth look at sports statistics, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Some weeks are good, some weeks are bad. If the pattern follows, this should be a good week. So we're going to try to make that the case. Thanks again for all the support, for all of the wagers you've made so far this week for the Rocket Mortgage, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Rocket Mortgage. Until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.